I'm just saying, after we saw the Golden Week holiday, has a big bump when it comes to Chinese equities, and then since then, things have kind of stalled a little bit. What are you looking for in terms of fresh catalysts now for another leg higher when it comes to markets in China?
Well, I think there are a few things that probably need to be settled. Like, for example, whether there's some signs of improvement in the power shortage problems, how the Evergrande issue is being solved, and ideally, will the government start to give some more optimistic and promising message regarding the internet sector, which is under quite a lot of regulatory pressure in the last 6 to 9 months?
Right. I was going to get your take on the tech sector, because we are starting to see the likes of Morningstar saying, look, internet stocks in China have basically bottomed out because right now you're starting to see a little bit more about where these probes go, the punishments like we saw with Meituan. You're starting to see a little bit more clarity on the earnings impact. Would you subscribe to that kind of idea that we've reached kind of a floor here when it comes to Chinese tech?
Near term, yes. But longer term, I think the question is, well, the government may still have quite, if you look at last 6 to 9 months, the government's regulatory actions is very widespread, very ambitious, and in many ways hasn't really thought very clearly about what kind of tools and instruments they want to implement. Sometimes it's quite, you could say, negative to market sentiment. I don't think we could be sure that it will not happen again. Frankly speaking, the government continues to be very ambitious, continues to change a lot of issues. So given the fact that the internet sector has been developed outside the government's control for like 20 years to the current stage, it's way too early to argue that this is the end. There could be some other things the government will need to address. May not be this year, but next year. Then in that case, you will create another round of negative developments until you get to a stage in which the government becomes very comfortable about the internet companies and the e-commerce behaviors becomes very much like a state-owned entities. But it will be a very long way to go.
And I guess, what are you talking to clients about the most now? I mean, whether it's the regulatory front, whether it's the power crunch that we're seeing in China, to even just the Evergrande story, what do you think is still top of mind right now that potentially is still putting a cap on risk?
I think, well, these three issues basically is rather difficult to really separate which ones get most eyeball. All of them get quite a lot of eyeballs. You could say that the Evergrande issue seems to be at least temporary, dying down a little bit, but it could come back again. So I think, well, three issues, all very topical. The internet regulations also, as you said, people seems a little bit more confidence, but the longer term, but in the longer among the three things, from a long-term perspective, the internet regulation is the biggest issue. But in near term, short term, then, well, how the power shortage and the Evergrande issues being solved is, you could say, more topical.
I was going to get to the property story, because you continue to see when it comes to China junk bonds, those yields are now at decade highs, around 18%. Is that something that you would touch right now, or do you think this actually, is something that you should avoid, or does it actually open up some opportunities for you?
I will avoid at this stage. I think, well, pretty simple. There are two issues you need to consider. Number one, in terms of priorities, who get repaid? It's definitely the property buyers who pay down the down payment in China will get repaid first. And then maybe the construction companies, the material suppliers. Foreign bondholders seems to be pretty late on this queue. And indeed, I think there's another situation is for some of the Chinese property companies which don't have a overseas business. In the past, they need special approval to get the foreign exchanges to pay their foreign debt. That's why historically, these property developers, the property bond yield in trade in Hong Kong or overseas are generally speaking very high. And with these kind of development and happening in China, whether they can get the foreign exchanges to pay their overseas bond yield payment is another big issue apart from their own business. So I think right now this is way too much uncertainty.
What could restore confidence then? I mean, we're seeing some silence when it comes to the PBOC. I mean, it seems likely that they're not going to bail out Evergrande, but ring fence it. But what do you think is the form that the policymakers need to make to try to restore some confidence in this sector again?
I think it may be a little bit too early to talk about restoring investors' confidence here, because it seems that PBOC is still dealing with the Evergrande issues, and not just Evergrande. You have other private Chinese property developers like the Fantasias are not willing to pay. So, and I would pretty sure to say that PBOC at this moment, until there's a major change in policy, are not likely to come out to say that we provide US dollar to repay the bond. So, well, I think we really need to let all this dust settle. Potentially, some companies have to go down, and maybe the impact becomes too large. The government has bigger concern and say that, okay, we set up some special instruments to solve these issues. But we have to know that I don't think the government is entirely happy about the very rapid growth of foreign bond by domestic Chinese property companies in the last 10, 20 years. Anything, they probably will need to contain this growth in any case.